Miss Michelle, the children's librarian at the North Mankato Taylor Library, and I have been doing story time here at the library for a very long time, and I have loved every minute of it, and it is just so fun to watch everybody grow up and still come back to the library eventually now and then. And I just love seeing the joy on kids' faces as I am reading some stories to them. And I just hope they take that home with them and just get a love of reading. So we are going to read chapter 9, The Sand Store. That spring, Betsy's father built a room on their house. He said, "What if our family should grow bigger? There's a bedroom for Mother and me, and one for Julia and Betsy. But what about Robert Ray Jr. when he comes along?" So he hired a mason and a carpenter, and they built another bedroom. It was downstairs, tucked into the corner between the back parlor and the kitchen. It was going to belong to Betsy's father and mother after all. Robert Jr. could have one of the bedrooms upstairs, Betsy's father said. Betsy and Tacy thought it was exciting to have a room built on. They played seesaw on the clean, good-smelling planks. They made curls for their dolls out of the fresh yellow shavings. They dug in the sand pile, which the mason had left. That sand was what started the sand store. Betsy and Tacy had played store lots of times. The piano box had been first one kind of store and then another the summer before. It had been a millinery store full of hats made from maple leaves, and it had been a lemonade store where they sold lemonade. Now it became a sand store on an account of the fresh new sand. It happened on the first good play-out Saturday in spring. The sun was warm over the earth. Robins and bluebirds and orioles flew in and out of the newly leaved maples, singing as they went. The air smelled sweet from the blooming plum trees in Betsy's father's orchard and the plummy purple lilacs by the kitchen door. Julia and Katie had gone up on the hill to pick flowers, but Betsy and Tacy had stayed to play in the sand. The sand was so white and pretty that Betsy got an idea. "Let's put it in bottles and sell it," she said. "Where will we get the bottles?" asked Tacy. "Oh, we'll ask our mamas and Mrs. Benson," said Betsy. So she and Tacy ran to get the bottles. Betsy's mother gave them an olive bottle and a pickle bottle and a ketchup bottle. And Tacy's mother gave them a pickle bottle and a ketchup bottle and a big fat jar. And Mrs. Benson gave them a ketchup bottle and a pickle bottle and a perfume bottle with a blue-colored stopper. Betsy and Tacy washed all the bottles and took them to the sand pile. "Now we'll fill them," said Betsy, and they each began on a pickle bottle, putting the sand in with spoons. Tacy held her bottle up to the sun and looked at it. "I wish that sand was colored like our Easter eggs," she said. Then Betsy jumped up and began to jump up and down. "Tacy," she cried, "I saved those Easter egg dyes. They're put away in bottles in our piano box." And sure enough, they were. They were hidden in a corner under a pile of yellow shaving curls and some Sunday school cards and a box where a turtle had lived. There was green dye and yellow and purple and red and blue. Betsy and Tacy ran into their houses and got cups. The cups with handles missing and cracks along the sides. They emptied the dye into the cups and put sand into the dye, and they left it in the dye until it was colored. Then they spread it out on one of the new planks, each color in a different heap. While it dried, they sang a song which Betsy made up. It went like this: "Oh, the Easter egg dyes, the Easter egg dyes. We can make the sand into Easter egg pies, but we're going to fill beautiful bottles instead, with Easter egg yellow and Easter egg red." At dinner time, Julia and Katie came down from the hill with their hands full of violets and hepaticas, blood roots, and Dutchman's breeches. They stopped and stared when they saw the colored sand. "Well, for goodness sake," they said. And they said, "We'll help you fill those bottles after dinner." Julia and Katie were nice sometimes. Besides, it was fun filling the bottles. The vanilla bottle and the ketchup bottles were filled with sand of just one color. That was because they were hard to fill. Their necks were small. The other bottles had sand in layers, purple with yellow, green with red, and red with blue. The jar that Tacy's mother had given them was the prettiest of all. Into that one they had put the sand of every color. The mouth of the jar was wide so that the stripes could be smooth and even. It made Betsy throb inside to see the shining colors through the glass. When they had finished, Julia jumped up. "Now I've got to practice my music lesson," she said. "I've got to take care of Paul," Katie said. Betsy and Tacy didn't care. In front of the piano, they put 2 chunks of wood, the kind that Betsy's mother burned into the kitchen stove. Across those chunks, they laid one of the planks from the room Betsy's father had built. They got a cigar box to hold their money, and Tacy sat behind the counter, and Betsy called, "Sand for sale! Sand for sale!" She called it as loud as she could. At last the children began to come, all the children of Hill Street. They brought bottles of sand, and they paid for them with pins. The bottom of the cigar box was glittery with pins, but Betsy and Tacy wouldn't sell their 2 best bottles for pins. They wouldn't sell the perfume bottle with the blue-colored stopper, nor the big fat jar. "We'll sell them to Mrs. Benson," they said. So when all the rest of the bottles were gone, they went to Mrs. Benson's house. She was busy getting supper, but she stopped to admire the bottles. "What beautiful bottles of sand," she said. "How much do you ask for them?" "We don't know," said Betsy and Tacy. "Would 5 cents apiece be enough?" 5 cents apiece, said Betsy and Tacy. They were astounded. Mrs. Benson gave them each a nickel and put the big fat jar on her piano and the perfume bottle on her parlor table. "Don't they look beautiful?" she said. Betsy and Tacy thought they did. Halfway up the hill, Betsy said, 5 cents is a terrible lot of money." "I know it," Tacy said. "I'm not sure," said Betsy, "but I think that 5 and 5 make 9. "I'm sure they do," said Tacy. "I've heard Katie talking about it." "It's a lot of money to keep around and not spend," said Betsy. After a moment, Tacy said, "We could go to Mrs. Chubbuck's." "No," said Betsy. "You only need pennies to buy candy. These are nickels. We can buy something more important than candy." She thought and she thought. "Do you know what I think we better buy?" she asked after she had thought. "What?" asked Tacy. "That chocolate-colored house." "The one we pass when we go to school?" asked Tacy. "With the tower," said Betsy, "and the pane of colored glass over the door." "What would we do with it when we got it?" asked Tacy. "Why, live in it. We'd sleep in the room with the tower. We could look through the colored glass whenever we pleased," Tacy said. So they decided to go and buy the chocolate-colored house. At the vacant lot, they met one of Tacy's brothers. It was George, the one who asked the tailor for fashion sheets for Tacy. "Aren't you 2 a long way from home?" he asked. "We go to school this way every day," Tacy said. "But this isn't school time, this is supper time," said George. As he spoke, the whistle blew for 6 o'clock. "Well, it's like this," said Betsy. "Tacy and I earned a lot of money today. So you're going to Mrs. Chubbuck's?" "No," said Tacy. "We're going to buy a house." "A house? What house?" "That house," said Betsy and Tacy, and they pointed through the trees on the vacant lot to the corner of the street beyond. You could see quite plainly the tower of the chocolate-covered house. "How much money have you got?" asked George. 9 cents, said Tacy. "We think it's 9 cents, said Betsy. Then they opened their hands and showed him the 2 nickels. George pulled his mouth down hard as though he were thinking. "It's a lot of money, all right," he said. "It isn't quite enough, though, to buy that house. I wouldn't buy it today if I were you. What are we having for supper, Tacy?" "I don't know," said Tacy. She hung her head in disappointment. Betsy swallowed hard. "Maybe it's near enough summer," said George. so that you two could take your plates up to the hill. Do you remember how you used to do that?" "Oh, yes," cried Tacy. "It was fun," cried Betsy. They had almost forgotten how they used to eat on the hill. They looked up Hill Street, and the hills seemed to have been painted with a light green brush. Their little bench was waiting in the rosy sunset light. "I'll go ask my mama," said Betsy. "I'll go ask my mama too," said Tacy. They both started to run. "And put those nickels in the bank," George called. "Save them, do you hear?" But Betsy and Tacy were running too fast to hear.
Hi everyone, it's Amber, Secretary of the Board at Betsy-Tacy Society again, and I'm sitting here with my daughter Isabella.
Hi.
You're going to hear from us a lot during the Betsy-Tacy Read Aloud. Today we are going to be trying to make the colored sand just like Betsy and Tacy did when they made their sand store. So they had grabbed a ketchup bottle, a pickle bottle, and a perfume bottle with their like different colored stoppers. We grabbed like our salsa jar, Bella's slime bottles that she uses, and then just some other jam jars for our sand. And then we also grabbed out of our Easter kit that we borrowed from a friend, we have the tablets just like they did when they saved their leftover dye from their Easter eggs. And if you remember, they had purple and yellow and green, red and blue. We also have orange because why not? And then pretty soon here, oh, and we have sand. So we brought this sand all the way back from Florida just for today's video. They used light colored sand for theirs, so we needed to find light colored sand, and we realized we had this left over from our vacation last year. So this worked out actually very perfectly. So let's get started, Bella.
Okay.
So we'll pour our, even though it's not dissolved, we're just gonna go for it. So see if this works. Every tutorial I saw online did not have, they all used like food coloring to dye sand. I'm just gonna like just pour a bunch in there, Bella.
Okay.
But this is a Betsy-Tacy sand. Usually we have an event where people or little kids can come and try and make their own sand jars. But Bella and I are going to make some sand jars today and use up some of the Betsy-Tacy sand. So we just put them in these bottles, kind of like the tie-dye bottles almost. We just use up whatever, or like a water bottle. You can do that at home. And then you can layer it, or you can do what Betsy and Tacy did in like their vanilla bottles and use just one color. I'm gonna do in the order of what Betsy-Tacy did in their other bottles. So like purple first. Get a nice layer. And doesn't have to be flat because it'll make like nice layers. What are you doing, Isabella?
I'm gonna put a little bit of orange, red on the bottom, and then the rest is gonna be yellow.
Oh, nice.
Sand for sale, sand for sale.
Okay, so here we are the very next day with our sand, and you can see that the colors actually got a little bit more vibrant. So this is what happens when you dye sand with the tablets from your Easter egg dye kit. All right, so 3-year-old Huxley is making his jar now too. Wow.
Bella.
Like Bella did. We're gonna go to the very top of his jar. What color did you do?
This one.
Good. Oh, let's take off the lid.
Okay. I get it off.
Good job. What color is that?
Pink.
Purple?
Purple.
Very good. Just like Betsy-Tacy?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know Betsy-Tacy?
Yeah.
What's their names?
Betsy-Tacy.
Very good. Can Huxley say sand for sale, sand for sale? Say sand for sale.
Sand sale.
Good job.
Sand sale.
Sand for sale.
This one works. I did it. More.
More jars?
Yeah.
Okay.